Emily said to me, "I need a break." No contact. I heard her, but I didn't react. 2 years together, and I had become familiar with her patterns, the subtle signals she left behind. She framed it as needing time to figure herself out. I framed it as data to analyze. I respected her request, not because of softness or sentimentality, but because I knew that any hasty reaction now would only create noise, undermine control, and ruin the information I needed. The first week passed without incident. I went to work, kept my routines, focused on my projects. No calls, no messages, just observation. I recorded every detail, her activity on social media, subtle cues in conversations with mutual friends, her avoidance patterns. Every piece was data, each one a part of the bigger picture. By the second week, I saw a post. Emily had been tagged by her mum, Cancun. The image was sharp, sunlight highlighting everything, a cocktail in her hand, a relaxed posture, and the reflection of a man in her sunglasses. No ambiguity. Observation complete. I took screenshots. No immediate messages. No anger, no pleading. Everything was stored, analyzed, and evaluated. I reviewed all past messages, conversations, and interactions. Patterns emerged. Times she ignored my concerns. Moments her attention wavered. Small gestures that hinted at distraction. The photo confirmed what the data already suggested. Space wasn't about introspection. It was a replacement. Walking the streets that night, I remained calm. Neon lights, passing cars, background noise. Emotions existed, but only as data, not drivers. I analyzed every possible scenario, every potential path. The only objective, clarity, control, and a calculated plan for the next move. I planned every step carefully. Confronting her immediately would only create chaos, sacrifice, leverage, and cloud judgment. Strategic silence would provide information. Patience would maximize control. The goal was not revenge. Not drama, it was understanding the truth, defining outcomes, and acting deliberately. Back at my apartment, I reviewed the evidence, screenshots, timestamps, patterns of behavior. I made notes, built scenarios, confrontation, temporary withdrawal, or recalibrating expectations. Each scenario was evaluated. Likelihood of success, potential consequences, impact on personal boundaries. Priorities were clear: information, control, and my own limits. By the time I went to bed, I had made one decision. I would not reach out tonight. I would let information accumulate. I would act based on data, not emotion. I understood, coldly, that this was a turning point. Whatever her intentions, the relationship had shifted. Control was no longer mutual, it rested with the one who calculated the next move. Lying in bed, I observed my thoughts like a detached analyst, noting patterns in my own emotional responses. Every variable mattered: trust, patience, perception, evidence, and the ability to anticipate her next move. I had clarity. I had strategy, and for the first time since she left, I was fully in control. Over the following days, I continued monitoring social media and outside interactions. Every post, every habit, every pattern was analyzed. I realized what I saw wasn't coincidence, it was behavior. She had been planning her next move, and I was simply confirming the evidence. I didn't get angry. I didn't cry. I didn't scream or plead. Everything was observed, analyzed, and stored. Emotions were noted, but irrelevant to action. What mattered was clarity. Evidence provided a complete, indisputable picture. Standing in front of the mirror, I looked straight at myself. I thought, if this is the way she chooses, then I will choose my own path. I won't lose control, I won't lose clarity, and I won't lose myself. A sense of calm power settled over me. This was authority not from revenge, but from observation, analysis, and calculated decision-making. And that's the difference. While she sought to replace me, I sought to reclaim control over myself. Every step, every action from now on would be strategic. Every decision, every choice grounded in data and reason, not emotion. In silence, I found power. In observation, I found clarity. In cold calculation, I found identity. Days passed. I didn't reach out, and I didn't react publicly. Instead, I continued to observe. Each post she made, each subtle update, was logged in my mind, analyzed. Cancun wasn't just a vacation, it was evidence. A reflection of intent. I catalogued it, understanding her choices without letting it dictate my emotions. I reconstructed our last conversations, every joke, every disagreement, every compromise. Patterns became clear. Emily had always tested boundaries subtly, often masking dissatisfaction with humor or casual remarks. This wasn't new. What was new was the clarity of the evidence before me. Her break was never about introspection. It was a step toward replacement. I made a list of options. I could confront her directly, demand answers, or attempt to salvage the relationship. Each scenario carried risk. Confrontation could escalate, emotions could cloud judgment, and outcomes could be unpredictable. Salvaging would require compromise on principles I wasn't willing to bend. Every path required calculation. Every choice had consequences. I chose strategy. I chose patience. I chose control. One evening, I drafted a message not to send immediately, but as a framework. It was concise, factual, devoid of emotional plea. I've observed your actions and interpreted them. I understand your intentions. I am processing this and will determine the next steps accordingly. Let me know when you are ready to have an honest discussion. I paused. Reading it over, I deleted it. Not out of doubt, but out of strategy. Timing was as important as content. Releasing it now would signal urgency, desperation. That was a mistake I wouldn't make. I saved it, but did not send it. Control was maintained by restraint, by observation, by patience. Then came the final data point. Mutual friends, unaware of my analysis, mentioned casually that she seemed happy with someone new. Predictable, expected, yet confirming. I didn't react. I noted it, calculated its significance. Evidence matched hypothesis. Prediction validated. At this point, clarity wasn't just emotional, it was operational. I had identified all variables, her actions, her intentions, her environment, and the timeline. I had considered my own responses, my boundaries, my objectives. The next step would be deliberate. I would act only when the information aligned perfectly with my strategy. I imagined confronting her, watching her reaction, measuring every nuance, evaluating body language, tone, Every response would be catalogued for understanding, not for drama. The goal was not to punish, it was to assert clarity and maintain integrity. ensuring that any decision I made was grounded in evidence, not emotion. Finally, the decision crystallized. I would not beg, not plead, not chase. I would communicate precisely once the timing served my purpose and the information was complete. Until then, I observed, I recorded, I analyzed. The relationship, as it had existed, was effectively over, but closure would be on my terms. By the end of the second week, after her posts, I felt a calm resolve. The betrayal didn't stint, existed as data. The heartbreak didn't cloud, my judgment it was logged, acknowledged, and set aside. Power rested in observation, patience, and strategic decision. I was no longer reacting. I was controlling. In the silence, I found freedom. In the restraint, I found power. In the calculated patience, I found clarity. Emily had made her choice. I had made mine. The difference was I acted with strategy, not impulse, with calculation, not desperation. I understood the rules now. Control is held by the one who observes, who waits, who decides deliberately. And as the days passed, I realized something crucial. The relationship was no longer a test of love or loyalty. It was a test of composure, of strategy, of who could remain clear-headed while the other acted impulsively. I had passed. The rest was information, waiting for the right moment to act. Weeks passed. One maintained observation. No messages, no calls, no pressure. Everything I did was based on information, not emotion. Every post, every subtle sign from Emily was catalogued and analyzed. Every detail was a piece of the puzzle, guiding my final move. One evening, a mutual friend mentioned casually that she was in the city, seemingly wanting to meet someone. This didn't make me anxious or tense. I calculated the opportunity to clarify everything had arrived, but action had to be precise, not emotional. I envisioned the confrontation, every gesture, every look, every tone analyzed. Everything would be recorded for understanding, not drama. The goal wasn't punishment. It was assertion. I understood the situation. I held control, and all decisions were mine. On the day we agreed to meet, I arrived early. I observed her from a distance, measuring her movements, expressions, interactions with others. Every reaction logged in my mind. When she saw me, I walked directly to her, calm and composed. No anger, no trembling, only a cold, analytical gaze. I said, "Emily, I've observed and understood everything." The so-called break wasn't about self-reflection. It was about replacing me. I respect your choice, but from now on, all decisions regarding this relationship will be under my control. We can end it here, or have one honest conversation to close things clearly. She paused, silent for a moment. I continued, I am not begging. I am not pleading. I only want clarity, so we both understand our positions. I have remained calm, observed, and calculated from the beginning. Now is the time to act based on data, not emotion. A few seconds of silence. She looked at me and finally lowered her head, a silent acknowledgement. No argument, no excuses. Her quiet was the clearest confirmation. I knew the power and control now rested with me. I had executed the strategy. No impulsive actions, no emotional compromise. And I had preserved myself. Walking away, I felt relief. Not satisfaction, but clarity. I knew I had maintained composure, observed thoroughly, and made the final decision strategically. In the days that followed, I didn't need to monitor her. I knew I had control of the situation, understood all the data, and most importantly, I had protected myself. Power wasn't in emotion or dependence, it was in patience, observation, and strategic decision-making. Finally, I realized the relationship had ended long ago, but I was the one who chose when and how to close it. Emily had chosen her path. I had chosen mine. And in that choice, I found freedom, control, and clarity, three things that emotion could never take away. In the weeks after the meeting, life returned to a new kind of normal. But normal was no longer what it had been. I didn't need to monitor. I didn't question or doubt. All the data was clear. All decisions had been made. I lived with my choice, and it brought a strange relief, not satisfaction, but the certainty that control and clarity now belonged to me. True power doesn't come from forcing or controlling someone else. It comes from remaining calm, analyzing situations, and making calculated decisions. I didn't let emotion dictate my actions. I didn't let heartbreak weaken me. I realized that freedom, power, and identity all come from controlling oneself. Friends and colleagues noticed the difference. I didn't have to say anything, but the way I carried myself, interacted with others, radiated quiet confidence. No need for explanations, no need for proof. True strength lay in restraint and clarity, not in words or grand gestures. Occasionally, I saw her on social media, living her new life. No jealousy, no anger. I simply observed, analyzed like a strategist. Every detail, every choice, every gesture became data for me to maintain boundaries, remain calm, and act strategically. I understood that when someone chooses their own path, you don't need to engage in their story. The only control you need is control over yourself. From this story, one lesson became clear. The winner isn't the one who takes someone else's heart, but the one who retains their own. Love, trust, or betrayal are just data points. How you process information, maintain clarity, and stay calm determines real power. One morning, looking in the mirror, I realized the biggest difference. I no longer let emotions lead me. Every decision, every action, every interaction from now on would be based on strategy, data, and reason. A sense of calm spread through me. No hatred, no regret, only clarity and quiet power. I walked through the city streets, observing the world around me as I had once observed her. Everything was data. Every interaction held value. But now, I wasn't bound by emotion or expectation. I was fully autonomous. I understood that patience and calculation are the ultimate strength, beyond any emotional reaction. This story didn't end with rage or tears. I didn't win through revenge or punishment. I won through calm, observation, and self-control. I had overcome the greatest challenge, not from anyone else, but from my own emotions. And from this point on, I walked with a kind of power few ever attain: freedom, control, and absolute clarity. Everything concluded not with anger or sorrow, but with deep understanding, strategy, and complete control. Emily had chosen her path. I had chosen mine. And in that choice, I found my true self, unshaken, unaltered, and fully in command. In the days that followed, I lived each moment with quiet confidence. Power no longer lay with anyone else. It resided in my hands, in the ability to remain calm, observe, and act strategically. And that once again brought a freedom that nothing could take away. In the days that followed, I spent more time on myself, not to recover or seek comfort, but to observe myself, assess my limits, strengths, and personal values. I reviewed every choice, every action, from the smallest decisions to major strategies, and realized that what I once considered challenges were actually opportunities to test my patience, composure, and strategic thinking. I understood that in any relationship, true power doesn't come from controlling someone else, comes from maintaining control over yourself. Negative emotions, disappointment, or anger, if left unchecked, could weaken me. I learned to treat emotions as data, analyze them, and use them to make decisions rather than let them dictate my actions. I began setting new plans, focusing on work, hobbies, health, and personal goals I had previously neglected. Every day became a chance to practice focus, discipline, and strategy, becoming a better version of myself. No one could shake my decisions or emotions. I learned to turn downtime, even small moments, into tools for awareness and inner strength. Sometimes I thought of Emily, recalling the happy moments, the arguments, even past frustrations. But instead of regret or resentment, I analyzed those memories as data, extracting lessons, understanding her limits, and gaining deeper insight into myself. Each memory, each experience became part of my life strategy. Stay calm, analyze, act deliberately and purposefully. I also started observing the world around me in the same way. Every interaction, every action from others' friends, colleagues, strangers was data. I learned to read motives, identify risks, and spot opportunities. Every day was an exercise in strategy, observation, and information processing. I understood that the future doesn't belong to the impulsive. It belongs to those who can assess, choose timing wisely, and maintain clarity in every situation. Even when facing minor failures or mistakes, I didn't feel flustered or discouraged. I analyzed, learned, adjusted my strategy, and moved forward. I realized that true strength isn't temporary victories, but the ability to remain steadfast, unaffected by circumstances. Ultimately, I recognized a simple yet powerful truth. Freedom and power are not things you receive from others, they are things you build for yourself. When you control your emotions, analyze every piece of information, and act strategically, you achieve true freedom. From this point on, I walked forward with unshakable confidence, knowing that any challenge ahead could be handled with strategy, patience, and absolute clarity. The future was no longer uncertain. It was in my hands, step by step, decision by decision. I no longer worried about what others did or the choices they made. I knew that, no matter the situation, I could always control myself, evaluate, and act strategically, and through every step. I learned this. No one can take your power if you know how to remain calm, observe, and act deliberately. Emily chose her path. I chose mine. And in that choice, I found freedom, power, and absolute clarity. 3 things that emotion can never take away. Life doesn't stop just because a relationship ends. I realized that the lessons I had learned weren't just for dealing with Emily, they were a guiding framework for every situation in the future. Every decision, every action had to be carefully considered, and every new challenge was an opportunity to apply what I had learned. I began setting larger personal goals. No longer small plans, I focused on work, learning new skills, expanding my network, and increasing my independence. Every step was calculated, how to maximize results, while maintaining absolute control and composure. I also realized that the greatest challenges didn't come from others, but from my own emotions and old habits. Some days, loneliness or emptiness crept in, but instead of being swept away, I observed, identified, and turned it into data to enhance self-awareness and self-mastery. I learned to face temptations and negative patterns, transforming them into strategic lessons. Every negative emotion became a chance to practice patience, clarity, and analytical thinking. I expanded my perspective outward, observing people around me, learning from them, identifying their motives and strategies. I realized the world is full of opportunities, but only those who plan, observe, and remain calm can take advantage of them. Everything else is noise I can filter out. I started recognizing behavioral patterns, predicting reactions, and forming strategies even before situations occurred. Each passing day was a lesson, a chance to test my ability to control myself. I learned to schedule, prioritize, and allocate energy to maximize efficiency while maintaining absolute focus. Even when facing minor failures or mistakes, I no longer panicked or felt lost. I analyzed, adjusted my strategy, and moved forward. I understood that true strength isn't temporary victories, but the ability to stand firm and make calculated decisions in any situation. One morning, looking in the mirror, I saw a different version of myself. No fear, no influence from past emotions or relationships. I realized that true power is the ability to choose your path, control yourself, and act with clear strategy. I knew that any challenge ahead, no matter how unexpected or difficult, could be handled if I applied these principles. I spent time analyzing my environment, opportunities, new relationships, and potential situations. I began crafting detailed plans for personal projects, career steps, and handling difficult problems without letting emotions interfere. Every day became a series of deliberate actions. Every decision was carefully considered. Finally, I felt true freedom. Not freedom because there were no ties, but freedom because I knew I held power in my hands, had plans in my mind, and maintained composure in my heart. I had passed a critical chapter in life, and now I moved forward with strength reinforced, preparation meticulous, and readiness for any situation. Every day now presented a new challenge, but I was no longer afraid. I knew that every decision could be calculated, every emotion could be observed, and power resided in my hands. I had learned that true freedom and power aren't luxuries. They are the result of patience, strategy, and absolute awareness. From here, I walked with absolute confidence in my own abilities, unshaken by any situation or person. Looking back on the entire journey, I realized that every challenge, every decision, every moment of uncertainty, and every surge of emotion was not random. It was part of a larger, deliberate strategy, self-mastery, inner power, and absolute clarity. What once caused me intense pain, confusion, or even anger is now just data, raw, unfiltered information to be analyzed and applied. Each heartbreak, each argument, each betrayal, and even moments of hope or joy were lessons that shaped me, hardened me, and prepared me for everything that comes next. I understood that life is never fair, and it never pauses for anyone. People leave, relationships end, circumstances change unexpectedly, challenges arrive when you least expect them. But what truly matters isn't what life throws at you, it's how you stand firm, observe the situation, analyze every variable, and take deliberate action. That is what creates real strength. It's not in temporary victories or forcing outcomes, but in the ability to navigate chaos with clarity and precision. I learned that power is not something you seize from others, nor is it about control over them or fleeting successes. True power lies in remaining calm under pressure, understanding the dynamics around you, and making strategic decisions even when emotions threaten to cloud judgment. When you master yourself, you master the circumstances that used to control you. Life becomes something you shape rather than something you endure. In the days that followed, I continued to apply this principle. I observed carefully, learning not only from my own experiences, but from the actions, words, and patterns of those around me. I built new relationships with intention, invested in personal growth, developed skills I had neglected, and cultivated habits that reinforced my self-discipline. Every encounter, every interaction, no matter how trivial, was treated as data, analyzed, and used to inform future choices. I didn't react impulsively. I processed, planned, and executed with precision. Every day became a laboratory for self-improvement and strategic thinking. Moments of solitude were no longer empty, they were opportunities to reflect, to evaluate weaknesses, to anticipate potential challenges, and to strengthen my resilience. When frustration or anger bubbled up, I didn't fight it or suppress it. I observed it, studied it, and turned it into insight. Each emotion, whether fear, envy, sadness, or even fleeting hope, became a tool, a lens through which I could better understand myself and the world around me. Ultimately, I came to a profound realization. True freedom and power are not things you demand from others or hope to receive, they are cultivated from within. Every carefully calculated decision, every emotion observed with detachment, every purposeful action taken with strategy contributes to a foundation of personal sovereignty that no one can take away. It is not dependent on circumstances, luck, or the approval of others, is self-generated and absolute. Emily chose her path. I chose mine. There is no hatred, no lingering resentment, no regret, only clarity, measured strength, and absolute confidence in my direction. I know that any challenge in the future, no matter how sudden or complex, can be handled because I've trained myself to be strong, vigilant, and strategic. My past no longer dictates my present or future, it informs it, as data to guide better choices. From now on, every day is an opportunity. Every interaction, every decision, every obstacle is a chance to observe, learn, and strategize. I am no longer the person swayed by fleeting emotions or trapped by past experiences. I am free, strong, and fully in control of my life. I make choices deliberately, think through consequences, and act with precision, no matter the stakes. This story does not end in anger, bitterness, or revenge. It concludes with deep self-awareness, absolute calm, and inner power. I have learned that life will always present challenges, tests, and unexpected turns, but those who maintain control over themselves are the ones who ultimately control their destiny. At this moment, looking back on everything, I feel something untouchable by money, by status, by anyone else, myself, my freedom, and my absolute strength. It is a power cultivated through experience, patience, and strategic awareness, and that, more than anything, is the final lesson, perhaps the strongest, most valuable lesson I have ever learned.